1, 2, 3.
While our weekly shows are edited to time for broadcast on public TV and community radio, we offer to our supporting members and podcast subscribers the full uncut conversation. The following is from our episode, Resisting Trump and Authoritarianism, the Beautiful Solutions Toolbox. These audio exclusives are made possible thanks to our member supporters.
With stiff trade tariffs, mass layoffs, and the sudden shuttering of long-lived government agencies, the first actions of Donald Trump's second term may have pleased some. They've certainly terrified many. And with critical programs like Medicaid and even Social Security potentially on the chopping block, lots of Americans are worried and looking for non-governmental ways to protect themselves and their families. What better time then to dip into a new book, Beautiful Solutions, a Toolbox for Liberation, which was released at the end of 2024 from OR Books. Beautiful Solutions states that, quote, our problems are global and interconnected, and lifts up models from around the world, particularly from the global south, for surviving in tough, even authoritarian times. Today, we're going to talk with one of the co-editors, Eli Feghali, who worked with Nathan Schneider and Rachel Plattis to bring Beautiful Solutions to completion after the death of their colleague, Elandria Williams. With me to co-host this conversation is Lauren Hudson, who knows this field very well. She is a cooperative and solidarity economy organizer and researcher, a collective member of the Solidarity Economy Principles and Practices Project, and she teaches at the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies. Lauren, welcome to Laura Flanders and Friends. I am very glad to have you with me.
Thank you for having me, Laura. I'm excited to be here as well. So the introduction of the book states our problems are global and interconnected, and that we have international models, particularly from the global south, about surviving in tough and even authoritarian times. These solutions are not new, but we do have an acute urgency in this moment to connect them to a larger political project. Through the collective wisdom from the Americas, Africa, Asia, and Indigenous peoples around the world, the book explores creative solutions and inspiring stories around questions of food sovereignty, housing, community finance, education, health, media, energy, and much more. Beautiful Solutions was edited by Rachel Plattis, Eli Feghali, Nathan Schneider, and the late Elandria Williams, who tragically passed before this book's publication. With us today, we have co-editor Eli Feghali, the regional organizing director at the New Economy Coalition, and Nikki Marín Baena, Beautiful Solutions contributor, who co-founded and co-directed Siembra NC, a Latino base building and political organization in North Carolina. Welcome to you both, and thank you so much for being here.
I'm going to kick things off with a question about the problem. Beautiful Solutions suggest that these are solutions to a problem. Eli, for beginners in this field, how do you define the problem that these solutions are a solution to?
Hi, Laura. Hi, Lauren. Great question. I think the way that I'll define it right now today is for most of the people on this planet and for most of our collective modern history, the history of human civilization, we have lived under some kind of system of domination, a system in which power and control was concentrated in a kingdom, in a small number of landowners or wealthy people, and the masses of people were in some way, shape, or form their subjects. I think even in modern liberal democracy, I think many of us would agree that that is the case today. Especially in the context of some of the most important decisions whether it's housing, food, our employment, what we need to survive and thrive and take care of each other. The control of those things is in the hands of others.
Nikki, is there anything you'd add to that? Seems like a good definition of the problem to me.
I think that the only other thing I would add is, I also think that we are in a moment, as Eli was saying, we've lived under systems of domination for much of our history. I also think that for much of that time, we were able to survive because we worked together. And so I think that one of the other definitions of the problem in this particular moment is that we are in a low trust moment in terms of our communities and our institutions.
Absolutely. And thank you. It is important to recognize we're in this long arc and there is something precise about where we are right now. So the book is titled Beautiful Solutions, the response to this. And so I guess it's a good place to start as any. What is behind the name, Eli, and where did it come from? And critically, who is the book for?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the name, we should start at the moment of inspiration, which was the book launch for Beautiful Trouble, a Toolbox for Revolution. I believe it was 2013 or maybe early 2014. And my fellow co-editor, Rachel, was at the book launch event and turned to one of the editors of that book, Andrew Boyd, and said, "Hey, what if we had a what if we had a version of Beautiful Trouble, which is about creative direct action, about creative resistance, but what if we had a version of that book about building the world we want?" And so Beautiful Solutions, the idea of it was born. And 10 years later, here we are. Can you remind me of your other questions?
Oh, I was asking also, who is it for?
Beautiful Solutions is for anyone that is looking for inspiration for how to organize in their neighborhoods and their communities to solve the problems that they're facing. It's for educators, it's for community organizers, it's for young people who are learned about this co-op over here and realize that it's connected to so much other things and want to start to dive into it, what some of those things are. And I hope it's for anyone that believes that a more beautiful, just, free world is possible.
Yeah, we can all get on board with that. Nikki, you're organizing in North Carolina and you do a lot of work that touches a lot of different collective corners, we should say. And your context is that North Carolina has a growing immigrant population. I believe the Latino population is the fastest growing in the state. So how is your community responding to Trump's deportation policy? What are some of the collective strategies that you all have been drawing on to serve your shared needs?
Yeah, I think we're definitely in a preparation moment. And thankfully, we've been able to draw a lot on some of the stuff that we learned from what we're calling Trump 1.0. And some of the things that we learned during that time were, one, that panic is a really crucial tool of the Trump administration. And so even though there is a lot of cruelty involved in detaining massive numbers of people, which they did last time and plan on doing more of, that actually it's the panic and the rumors that spread along with detentions that really, force people to stay home from work, pull their kids out of school. And so one of the things that we have is a 24-hour hotline that people can call when they think that there might be ICE agents somewhere in their neighborhood. And then we have trained volunteers who know how to be like, "Hi, I'm part of a neighborhood watch program. I'm just checking out. There's a suspicious vehicle reported here." And that way we can confirm or deny, is this ICE presence or not? And I think if we deny it, people can go about their day. And that requires a lot of coordination, neighborhood WhatsApp groups, volunteer trainings, people really being willing to help out people that they don't know. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing that we did a lot of between 2017 and 2020 is community food sales and fundraisers, because immigration detention usually ends up impacting the main income earners in a family. And so once that person is detained, it's not just the crisis of that person being detained, it's all of a sudden this family has no income. And in addition to paying all of their normal monthly expenses, they're trying to figure out immigration lawyers and different things like that. So community food sales, a lot of times in our community, people will say, hoy por ellos, mañana por nosotros. Today we do it for them. Tomorrow they may do it for us.
Nikki referred to 2017 and Trump 1.0. Eli, coming to you, I remember that after the election of Donald Trump the last time, I took myself off to Mondragon. Actually, I went with the Democracy Collaborative to learn about how the Basque people resisted dictatorship in the Franco era in Spain. I learned a lot on that trip. And I know you're familiar with Mondragon. There's some mention of those experiments in Beautiful Solutions, the book. But are there other examples from the global south or from outside this country that you look to in this particular moment, which, as Lauren said, is both part of a trajectory, not totally new, but has some specific aspects?
Yeah. I think the first thing to say to this question is that the strategies of what we call the solidarity economy historically have emerged out of extreme repression, crisis, and need. And so if you look at the history of cooperatives, the history of mutual aid societies, you will find dictatorship, repression, extreme violence, and poverty. Mondragon is, of course, an example of that. It's not, we decided deliberately not to include it in the book because it's gotten quite a bit of attention over the years, but it is an interesting example. And of course, Father Arizmendi was almost killed, narrowly avoided I think a death sentence due to his beliefs and his support of the Republicans against Franco. But to your question of different examples that come to my mind, I think of the recuperated factory movement, workers in Argentina and really all across the world, taking over their factory workplaces after owners abandoned them, and then demanding recognition and resources by the state. Thousands and thousands of workers participated in that movement, and many are still, that is their employment, in worker-run collective factories. I think about social solidarity clinics in Greece, in their economic crisis. Many of these solidarity clinics started forming in communities to provide health services and care and medicine to especially to migrants and folks that were and other folks who are most at risk of the economic impacts. And they ran collectively, and many are still in operation today. I think of the history of cooperatives in Reconstruction and during the civil rights movement. I think of Black cooperative towns, and I think of the farm workers credit union and the ways in which these strategies of recognizing the collective resources and the collective power that exists in our communities right now, and then figuring out creative ways to our needs. And so the Farm Workers Credit Union actually was established by Cesar Chavez for the farm workers that were left out of traditional banking. And then that same credit union was essential during the strikes and boycotts when it provided wages, it provided loans to support the workers who were risking their livelihood to participate in this movement. And so I bring that to mind because sometimes we think of these things as like separate, like, oh, you do your movement and your resistant work over here and you do your building over here, but that's actually not the case historically. And I think our movements are starting to integrate more of the resist and build. I know 10 years ago it was like there was very much a binary, and now there's a lot more integration happening.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm just really grateful for that framing, Eli, about these big models that we have. They can sometimes, they do two things at once, right? They're really inspiring and get people really energized, but then they can also seem like such a high threshold for participation in cooperative and collective practices. And at its roots and foundation, these are practices that we're talking about. It's cultures we're creating. And so, Nikki, one of the contributions that you write to Beautiful Solutions is about tandas and kind of connecting it to your earlier point about being in a low trust era right now. You write that they are rooted in trust, and organizing at the speed of trust is very important. I'm wondering if you could expand on that, about why it's important to organize at the speed of trust and how we can go about building it regardless of whatever model or solution we end up creating.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, I love that question. When I started out, I'm trying to remember, but when I started out as kind of a baby cooperative developer in my 20s, there was a time in the, what was that, early 2000s, that a lot of people got really excited about wages in the Bay Area and other kind of nonprofit cooperative development models. And I got really excited about it too. Part of what it did was it helped particularly immigrant women own their own businesses. And it helped immigrant women own their own businesses in fields where, like home cleaning, where there was a lot of exploitation. So it did, one, it helped them have their own assets, and two, it helped them avoid the exploitation that was otherwise really rampant in some of those sectors. And one of the things I saw is that if people joined straight into starting a business together, it didn't really give them the time to, one, all of a sudden we're doing democracy, and two, how are we relating to each other differently than we've related to coworkers or bosses or other people at a traditional job? And so one of the things that got me really interested in using tandas or saving circles as a part of a cooperative development process was that it was a kind of smaller, what we called the smaller barrier to entry. So anyone, you can take a workshop about tandas, you can read about them and get 4 of your friends in a group chat, and you can start one today. And so it's something that people can do really quickly. And the process of doing it over time helps build trust, helps build communication about money, which is such a vulnerable thing that most of us don't have practice with. And so if people can do that, then you can iterate into, okay, now what if we owned a business together? Okay, what are the conversations about money and our different values and attitudes about money that we each have that we're going to have to bring and reconcile with each other?
Nikki, can you clarify what a tanda is for people that don't know?
Yeah, so a tanda is a way of saving money in community. And so the way it works is we would all, for example, if we here, the 4 of us, were going to start one, we would agree on an amount of money. And so let's say that each of us feels like we can put in $100 a week. And so if each of us is putting in $100 a week, then we would take turns, each of us getting that total pot of money, the tanda. The tanda means pile. And so so one of us would get the first pile of $400, then the second pile of $400, until everyone's gotten a chance to get $400. And so what that does, if you've gotten the first pile, you still have to stay all the way until everybody gets their money. And so there is some vulnerability and some trust, and sometimes standouts have lots of people in them. So let's say it's 12 people who are each paying in $100 a week. By the end, someone's getting $1,200 only if everybody who got their $1,200 already stays in.
We're talking about so many examples that people can find actually in our archives of the show. And I encourage people to go and look. The reporting from Spain, the reporting from Greece, interviews with Adrienne Marie Brown about organizing at the speed of trust. That makes me both happy and conscious of the fact that we have been in moments like this before. And I guess one question I'd have for everybody, and you too, Lauren, as somebody who works in this area, is what are one of the key learnings from past experiences, things that we might do differently or better? I know that North Carolina recently saw the cooperative and solidarity economy sector respond in extraordinary ways to Hurricane Helene last fall. Are there learnings from that hurricane that hit a mountain area that we didn't expect when people were used to hurricanes on the coastal region? Are there things we have learned we wish we had in place next time a hurricane, be it political or or temporal, hit our turf? Lauren, why don't I kick that question to you?
Thank you. And it's a juicy one. I actually asked my students this last week as part of our check-in question. What is something you learned how to do in 2016 that would be helpful now? And some of them are very silly and fine. Like I learned how to garden, or I learned how to use a chainsaw, might come in handy. Some were more about practices and actually how to relate better to one another. And I can't stress enough how important having shared practices and shared values and moving with that direction has been helpful for the long term for many of the projects we've seen. Some of the things that we most admire happen because people really invested in one another as some kind of like relationship, kinship network, something. It's tricky because the other, let's say, like structures in our lives make that more difficult. If the rent is going up in your neighborhood, it's harder to create bonds for generations if you're constantly displaced, and we do have to contend with that. But prioritizing the relationship, or at least understanding that it is a cornerstone of the work and moving in that direction, I think is one of the largest lessons. And there are no shortcuts to doing it. It's not a, build a cooperative or a collective out of thin air kind of thing. We don't try and build models. We try and build movements for the long term. So that's what I would say has been the biggest takeaway.
I hear that strongly. So not necessarily what you're building. It doesn't have to be whatever it is, the 5th largest business in your country, like Mondragon, but how you're doing it. And I got to ask. Hi, lovely listeners. Laura Flanders and Friends is, as we say, the place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it. Our guests are doing it. Now we just want to thank you, our member supporters, for doing your part. All of you who have yet to become members, please do it. Join our community today by making a one-time donation or make it monthly at lauraflanders.org/donate. That's lauraflanders.org/donate. Thank you.
And a reminder to hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you. Now back to our full uncut conversation.
I got to ask you, Eli, the same question, but also you employed very different strategies, even when it came to making this book that we're talking about how you did it. So learnings from that process, perhaps, and maybe describe it a bit for our audience.
Yeah, thank you for that invitation. The way that we have over 70 people from around the world contributed to this book. And the way that we worked with them was first and foremost to trust them, to trust that they were the ones to tell their own story. And so as editors, we certainly worked with them to make sure that the format of their writing would fit our audience, would fit the book. But really, everyone who contributed to this book had the final say over what got put into the text. And that was a huge leap of faith. It also was a ton of work. It's a lot easier to be like, hey, can you please send us a draft and we'll let you know when the book's published. And so it took a lot longer than I think we had anticipated at first. But I think the principle behind it is one of trust and I think there's this framework called non-extractive storytelling. And we felt like that was very much in line with the value of the solidarity economy, which is the opposite of extraction. It's about liberation. And that's one thing I'll say.
Great. So Eli, I actually want to go back to that editing process, and to edit something with a lot of values, as you said, takes time. It runs against a lot of our, let's say, our tendencies here. And you have contributions, from all around the world and all different corners of people's organizing. And we'd be remiss not to mention that the process is also deeply informed by working with Alondria, who is not only an inspiring community leader that we both learned from, but a spiritual one as well. And so I'm wondering if you could just share a bit about what it was like working with them throughout this project.
It was one of the greatest gifts, honors, blessings in my life, to work as closely as I got to work with Alandria E. Williams, someone who many folks in the cooperative and solidarity economy movement consider their mentor, without whom this book would not exist, without whom the way this book was made would not exist. Alandria is someone that, despite several chronic health ailments, constantly was traveling the globe. And one day she'd be in Kenya, the next week she'd be back home in Knoxville, Tennessee, the next week she would be in New York City at a funder meeting. This is someone that just was constantly moving and constantly in relationship and building relationship and community with folks that were they were sharing in this this vision of possibility that is represented in this book and represented in her life's work. And I think that we had this quote in this book, but Alandria said, "What we're trying to do with Beautiful Solutions is tap into the collective ancestral wisdom all around us to help people imagine a different way of doing things." And that was my experience working with E on this project, and my experience of just being E's friend and in relationship with her. It was like there was just both the we know what our folks know what to do already, which is one of the fundamental, if not the fundamental principle of popular education, is the wisdom is here in the room. And also it's here in the room, not just because we know it in our heads, but because we know it in our bones. We know it because our people, our ancestors lived through the bigger calamities that we could imagine. They survived. They figured out how to build and grow and get stronger. And we're here today. We're standing on their shoulders. And we can't let these systems of domination make us forget that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So that tapping into that collective wisdom, I can't stress, is both deeply important and also easier said than done. And Nikki, one of the things that you wrote about recently in Progressive Magazine was, I think you phrased it as, our need to scale up not only our efforts, but also our ability to see one another as our people. And I'm wondering if you could share what that has looked like in North Carolina, seeing people recognize one another as our people and actually doing the tapping in, as Eli is saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here a story that I have about that. So I was mentioning earlier that we train volunteers to verify ICE presence, and one of the ways that looked during the past Trump administration was that ICE would come and do one big operation in North Carolina about once a year, and so about once a year we would have ICE move through the state, detaining people over the course of a week. And so we trained volunteers during those times, which were kind of high panic, high rumor times, to be not just on call, but to be actually stationed in Latino neighborhoods. One, so that if we got a call, they could get dispatched quickly to go check out what was going on. But two, most of the time it's like everything's fine, the roads are clear. And so we would have the volunteers send selfies. And the roads are clear in Greensboro, the roads are clear in Raleigh, the roads are clear in Thomasville. And one of the things that started, and we would post those on social media so that people knew. And one of the things that started happening is that people in parts of the state that we had no connection to at all started sending us selfies of like, the roads are clear in Wilmington, the roads are clear in Laurenburg. Sometimes they were Latino people. So they were so inspired by seeing other people who were often white people, Black people, not Latino people, kind of doing this as a kind of ally, solidarity thing. But it made people feel so daring and so brave that they were like, well, let me go see how the roads are where I live. And it was a service for a broader community of, I know that me checking out the roads, I know that me saying that things are okay here, it doesn't just help me feel safe, doesn't just help my family feel safe, but it'll help kind of lots of other people that I don't know who they are feel safer living their everyday lives.
I want to come back to this moment in time, and thank you for that, Nikki. It's obviously true that there are certain strategies and tactics that we can talk about the past, but we may not want to talk about what's happening right now, what people are planning, particularly perhaps where it comes to ICE, the immigration control enforcement folks. But this is the beginning of a year that has many people very afraid. It's the beginning of an administration that has a lot of people very afraid. We don't know yet how things will play out, but we know that the Trump administration is full of lackeys, people with their loyalty only to the president, and super rich people who have no accountability to the public or the law either. So I guess my question for all of us is, what do we fear? And what from all of this experience do we draw on? Certainly the ancestors, certainly the sense that this is not brand new. Anything else you want to lift up that might sort of maybe encourage people to look around and put some new things in place where they are? Eli.
The only thing that I feel some fear about in this moment is that, and maybe I'll just say we, maybe some of us, will give up ground that we don't need to give up out of anticipatory fear of what might happen. I think we need to respect and hold on to the power that our ancestors and that our communities have fought for, and hold on to it until it is taken from us. And that's not to say that the risks aren't real. That's not to say that the plans that are being telegraphed in the news aren't real, but it's to say that we should not let go of what we fought for until we absolutely have to. And we can make an assessment on when that is in the moment, but we just have to trust each other and trust ourselves. And I'm afraid that some people with a disproportionate amount of resources and power are gonna act out of fear, and not out of trust and love for each other. So I'm talking about I can specifically say I'm talking about foundations. That's one area for sure.
Media. We could pull up a list.
Media. That's right.
Nikki, what about you? What are you afraid of, and what practice do you want to suggest to people, perhaps?
My fear is really that we'll make it to 2028 with people not feeling like they have any better understanding of people who are different from them. And I think that, we were talking about Elandria Williams earlier, and one of the things that I remember so much about Elandria was this ability to kind of understand that big abstract ideas or our big dreams, that some part of them was already existing right here. That was like an incredible ability that Alandria had. Like, yeah, well, part of that is already happening. It's in Florida. And so I think that too, for us, how do we dream our big dreams about not just what we're fighting against, but what we're fighting for, and really hold on to those, and also understand that the little projects and the little connections that we make with each other, that we do those today, those are the only things that can become those big dreams.
I love that answer, Nikki, and it takes me to ask you the obvious, which is that's what Beautiful Solutions is all about, saying some of these examples are out there for us to study. They all deserve more attention. Is there a project that you would like to mention that you haven't yet, that you think kind of hints at the future you are working to bring into being?
I'm also just really excited about like, I live in North Carolina, and I'm seeing worker organizing happen in a real way in North Carolina. Uh, like Amazon workers, immigrant workers, I'm seeing fast food workers. And so I think that there's hope there for me about, I think that people have been splitting hairs about what happened in the 2024 election in a way that doesn't really speak to kind of what are working people experiencing right now. And I think that I'm really excited about seeing all of this worker organizing, and how worker organizing can be part of the kind of ground for what comes next.
Same question for Eli and Lauren. If you want a project you want to mention or a story you want to tell.
I think I want to mention something that's not even in the book.
Right.
Yeah, and it's something that everyone has in their neighborhood. It's called a public library, and it's a radical way of sharing knowledge and learning and access to technology and space for gathering and being with each other. And it's free, and it's everywhere. And it's a very subversive idea that people are building on. So there's libraries of things that are growing, and where people are figuring out, okay, how do we create structure so that we can share more than books and movies, but let's share tools, let's share art supplies. How else can we facilitate using technologies that we have and using these ancient practices and building space to make sure that folks that don't have enough resources to buy a snowblower can share one in the neighborhood. Yeah.
Yay to public libraries. Lauren, do you have a favorite list?
Wow. It's like there's everything, and then you're presented with it, and you're like, I don't even know where to start. Do I start with what people are more primed to do versus like the biggest?
I mean, one thing that amazes
things.
me is how big the network of cooperative institutions and the solidarity economy in New York City is in comparison to how it was 10, 20 years ago. And I know that you're very aware of that, Lauren, and I want to give you lots of credit, but I know you won't take it.
Thanks. Well, I think that the networking is really what I always often like come back to, is once we create something and it's so precious to us, and we work so hard and put so much energy in it, but it does participate in an ecosystem. And so I'm very proud of the work that we've done in New York with things like the Cooperative Economic Alliance of New York City, that took a lot of work by a lot of unsung people. But it's all about building that kind of web of relationships, not only so that we are not operating in the dark, but so that we actually create a value chain that we participate in, that, carries us through. So those are the things I'm often excited about, as well as the things like the library and public education. I'm a public educator, all of that good stuff. And I'd obviously love to hear from Nikki, you, and Eli, the role that networks even play in this landscape when we're talking about solutions.
Yeah, so I love that Alandria is like getting mentioned in several of these answers, but Alandria, you couldn't have a 10-minute conversation with Alandria about the solidarity economy without talking about networks and federations, because for Alandria, the question about how we get to scale, that was a huge part of the answer. It was like, okay, so how do we instead of thinking, we often think of scale in terms of like bigness, like how do we make the biggest possible business? And it ends up being a pretty, often a top-down kind of framework of thinking about scale, whereas networks and federations are more of a grassroots and up way of thinking about scale. And a federation is like, it's kind of like you have a group in a neighborhood, and then a bunch of groups in a neighborhood, and they vote on a citywide representative, and that in all the cities, their citywide representatives vote on a national representative, and the national representatives vote on a global. It's kind of uh, building from the bottom up of structures of governance. And networks, they can look very different. I was part of a national network called the New Economy Coalition. We were a membership network. We are a membership network of more than 150 organizations across the United States. And it's a voluntary network. So organizations join if they share values and they can meet the level of commitment that's being asked of them. And that's a network that is meant to represent the solidarity economy movement in the country and create spaces for members across sectors of the economy to be collaborating, working together on shared projects that are bigger than they could tackle on their own. And so that's another big reason to create these networks, is a shared power, shared creativity, shared learning.
Absolutely. Nikki, how about you? What role do networks play in your work?
Yeah, I mean, one example I can think of was we here in Greensboro back in 2021, we had a housing fight at a mobile home park that was getting bought out. And so we were working on a community organizing campaign. We were trying to figure that out. And at the same time, we could call our friends in Western North Carolina at Poderema and be like, okay, we don't know how to buy property, but if we were going to buy this thing, what would we do? And so they were like, we've already done this a bunch of times. Here, let us walk you through it. And then there have been times where they're like, I think there's a housing fight. Do you want to pitch in on this? Like, so I think there's kind of giving some people opportunities to kind of learn more about a specific thing and then share those learnings with each other. And also my organization, Siembra, has been part as an organization, a hub organization of Mi Gente, which is a national network of Latino members and organizations. And I think being able to share information and learnings about times like this is really important.
Well, Beautiful Solutions is all about sharing information and solutions and models and examples. And I want to thank everybody who made the book possible. Eli, I know it was an incredible labor of love. And it's fantastic that it's out there now, along with Beautiful Trouble. We'll include information about both books at our website. I want to end with the question we end every episode with, adjusted maybe just slightly. It's about the question that the future will tell of this moment. And the adjustment that I would make is, how do you think the Trump administration and similarly authoritarian administrations around the world will or won't affect the organizing that takes place in this time? If you were to look forward 25, 50 years from now, what do you think the story will be that the future tells of now? Nikki?
The story that I hope that the future tells of now is that the stakes got higher. Some people did become more afraid, and I think that made people take more risks, that made people try more new things, that made people reach out across differences to each other. And there was more art, and there was more laughing, and there was more community building, and that was eventually how we won.
What a beautiful story. I love it. I think we'll look back at this time and appreciate the importance of underground organizing. I think we will see the ways in which constraints drove creativity, constraints from repression, from legal challenges, from foundations pulling money. Like Nikki said, they inspired us to find new ways of organizing ourselves, that ultimately were the seeds that ultimately were exactly what we needed to do to grow into the powerful force that this world needs us to grow.
Lauren, same question to you. I recall that is it a Mexican saying? They thought they could bury us. They didn't know we were seeds.
Exactly. Yeah, I see this moment in the future. I have to think as an educator as well. How do we teach this moment too? How do we narrativize it for our students? And I think what they'll say is this was a rupture, right? And it was a rupture that forced it forced many of us back into some corners, but it was also an invitation to participate in the world in a different way. It almost gave us permission to build connections we wouldn't have thought of, to walk away from institutions that don't serve us. And it's a pivot in our class consciousness. And so I think that's what they'll say.
I like it. So a rupture and an opportunity, an invitation.
Inshallah.
Well, thank you all. I really appreciate you being here. Lauren, please come back. An invitation issued formally to you. I want you back. Let's do this again. Eli, congratulations on the book, and Nikki, continuing your work. It's really amazing.
Thank you.
For those who want to find all of our archives, you can through the links at our website. Till the next time, for Laura Flanders and friends, stay kind, stay curious, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the full conversation from our episode, Resisting Trump and Authoritarianism, the Beautiful Solutions Toolbox. Please join our members now by making a one-time donation or make it monthly. All the details are at lauraflanders.org. And thanks again to all our member supporters.